All right, Zach, here we go. How does a non-binary person commit murder?
I have no idea.
They/them.
Wow, that's a good one, man. That's good. That's a good one.
I would like to take credit for it, but I heard it on the internet. That the never fails internet. That's always full of useful and true and valid information.
Mm-hmm.
So there we
Yes,
go.
it is. It is. I love the internet, man. There's so many funny jokes that you can find on there. I get a good chuckle a lot. Even though, if you guys remember, if you've been here for any length of time, I've said on this podcast that if I was a dictator, I would. What is it, Brian? Ban the internet. So I'm kind of contradicting myself here, but anyway, not the point. Today we are here, guys, with a very special episode. Special in regards to all of our episodes being special. This is just another very special one because everyone is so special on their own. Today's episode is going to be about folks who think the world revolves around them. Okay? Why am I doing this? Let me back up a second. My name is Zach. I'm one of the hosts here. Brian is here as well. I got to get our names out here first. But yes, today we're going to talk about people who think the world revolves around them. We're going to go through some examples. Maybe we can give out some helpful advice as to how to, get your head unstuck from your ass. And maybe that'll help you if you're in one of those positions. Any thoughts, Brian, to add to that?
That's very blunt, but I can't say I disagree with the message there. Yes, to those people, and hopefully any people who are listening are not those people. But I can almost guarantee that of the people listening, at least one person who fits the description that we're going to get into a little bit more. So that message is definitely for them. Please, please, please get your head out of your ass and realize that the world, in fact, does not revolve around you.
And the problem is, though, anyone who actually does fall into that category probably isn't going to recognize that. So, that's part of today's episode is that we're going to help you identify whether or not you are one of these people. So strap in, guys, and play along. We'll see how it goes.
I mean, if people want an episode comparison as far as the energy, I said this to Zach before we got on here. Think easily offended episodes that we did. That kind of thing. A lot of the people that fit the first category probably fit the second one anyway. But that same kind of idea, same kind of messaging, and the same kind of energy, especially for me, because these groups of people are equally insufferable, but obviously in different ways, but equally insufferable.
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to think of some examples of people who I've known who think the world revolves around them. Obviously, a couple come to mind. I'm not going to name drop in this episode. I'm going to throw any big names out there. This is more like conceptually. I have a list of some traits here, right, for people who think the world revolves around them. I can give you some off the top of my head. I got a more structured list here. Brian, do you want me to get started on that and just see if you agree with what I have to offer here?
Yeah, so let's start with the list and see where the conversation takes us.
So your head's up your ass, right? That's the first thing. We already went over that one. And it's just characteristics of these people. Conversations is the first one I have on here. And basically what this means is when you talk to somebody, do you ever talk to somebody and you're no matter what you're talking about, they always have a way of bringing the conversation back to them. It always has to come back around and circle back to something going on in their lives. It can be helpful when you're talking to somebody and you're trying to relate with them on something, and so you bring up your own story to help that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about where no matter what someone else has going on, you always have to have something going on that's worse. Or whatever you experience is the more important thing because you have this idea that you're the, as we say, in media they say the main character, right? You feel like you're the main character. The story has to revolve around you. That's the first one I have, Brian. Second one is about one-sided relationships, and that's self-explanatory. The whole give and take is how relationships are built. We have an episode about relationships, a give and take, so you guys can go reference that as well. The give and take doesn't exist as much when someone thinks that only it's about what they receive. It's not about what they're able to give back to a relationship. And unfortunately, it's a lot of people out there who are like this. I'm sure you know some of yourself, Brian. What are your thoughts about these two before I I rattle off a couple more.
Um, the two main things I was going to say about the first one, you said it as you were going, so which is good. I guess we're on the same page there. The first one being the quick disclaimer that if you're having a conversation with somebody and you bring something else up in your own life, that doesn't necessarily mean you're doing what Zach and I are accusing you of, because sometimes that helps the listening process to say, it's not just, sometimes it's not enough to just say, I understand, because, a lot of times the person's response, even if they don't say it out loud, is, no, you don't. But if you give a story, especially the story is related to what you're talking about, then the person can understand a little bit more that, okay, you do get where I'm coming from here because you experienced something different. So that's an important disclaimer to make. That's not always the case, but the main character thing, I always like that analogy because, if you think about a movie where, and the movie's taking place in like some kind of crowded area, like a New York City sidewalk where there's people walking around doing all different things. But the main character, the only character in the movie who's actually part of the movie is, the scene is taking place around this main character. And everyone else kind of is in the background. And from what I understand, almost all of them are hired, pulled off the street and say, hey, we want you part of this movie. You're just going to walk down the sidewalk and that's it. But that, they don't get anything in the credits, anything like that. So that is how these people that we're talking about view their reality. That's how they view the world. That there's a movie, and what's taking place in their life is the main attraction, not just for them, the one that's experiencing it, but for everybody else. Because just like how everyone else goes to see the movie, everyone else is invested in this person, and the people who are in the background are just that, in the background. So if they're at a supermarket, the other people are just background actors who just got paid to just take up space, but you're the main star. You're the show. And this layer that I'm going to keep going back to, because it's very important that we add this. It's not just that you think this, you also believe that everybody else thinks this too about you, which is the most wild part of all.
Yeah, and I think it's another one I have on here is taking things very personally. Everything is a personal attack. Everything that anyone does to you or does around you, anything is just about you. It's kind of like the people who watch a comedy sketch and then the comedian says something and you just relate it back to you as if you're being personally attacked. Your example of you think that you're the center of attention. You think that everyone else is supposed to agree with you. So yeah, if that was true, if it was true that you were the main character, then yes, everyone else would be consciously aware of you, and the things that they're doing will have something to do with you because you're the main character. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Obviously, it's not the case. And I don't really understand how you get to this point where that's the way you view the world. That's the way you think. But I have to accept the reality that a lot of people do. A lot of people do hang on to that belief.
I don't know where the connection in their brain, like what they're missing, if a synapse is not firing or something properly or whatever. But like there are times where me, as an example, I will probably some kind of emotional reaction where I'll believe that something's about me. But then when I take a step back, then I eventually realize that not only is it not about me, there's no way it can be. So I'm able to go like bring myself down. So the reason I'm saying that is, again, relatability. Just because you do that every now and then does not mean you're one of these people. We're all human. We have our moments where we act irrationally. So that's another disclaimer that I want to make. But these people do it constantly, and I may even go so far as to say they do it almost like 100% of the time, which is hard to imagine. Like, it's hard to get inside a brain of a person who's like that. But you can you can never guarantee what's in a person's head, but you get the pretty good idea of that is how that person thinks constantly by what you observe, which is what you're already getting into is the observational part.
It's I think another way of putting what you just said is it's about maturity. If you know small kids, if you have small kids are the perfect example of complete and utter lack of empathy, right? They don't really care about anyone else. They're not interested in how you're feeling. I made a joke to my son and daughter last night because they didn't want to go to bed, right? They wanted to play on their games longer. They didn't want to go to sleep. So I told them, I started being really sarcastic with them. I told them, hey, it's fine, guys. It's fine. Tomorrow, good news. Tomorrow I'm going to give away your game systems to starving children in China. because they need to have fun too. And they were like, I don't want that shit. I don't care about those kids. I'm like, yeah, that's a fair reaction. That's a fair reaction to have.
Yeah, you don't see kids like a 3-year-old say, you know what, I'm not gonna have a temper tantrum. I see you had a long day at work. We'll come back when you're ready to have a productive conversation.
We'll circle back.
That's not how yes, that's not how kids
either one of my kids
but the key there is the key is the word kids.
Yes. If either one of my kids say we'll circle back around to that, I'm walking out of the house, and I don't even know what to do. That's going to be a strange situation. But yes, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to maturity. You know, the people who are mature enough to understand consequence, severity, things like that, to understand the world around them more, and the fact that we're all kind of cogs in a machine instead of just, you know, you're the only thing there, you're the only reason that things exist. It's about maturity, and I get it in one sense, because, again, immature people, there's plenty of immature people out there, but there's also a fear response, which is, it's kind of, in a way, scary, I think, for some folks to consider how unimportant they really are. I don't mean that to sound rude or mean, but if you really do understand the gravity of just how insignificant you are, it can become very depressing, and people can get really into their heads and their feelings about it. So sometimes it's better to just deflect all that and to pretend that you're more important in order to comfort yourself. Just my thoughts.
That is a very, ironically, a very mature way of looking at it. And when you frame it that way, you can have a little bit of sympathy or even empathy for that person, because even if you don't haven't experienced it directly, you can have an idea what it's like to feel lonely or unworthy or inadequate or, you know, unlovable or any of these things. So, and people sometimes need something to latch on to not feel those things anymore. You can sympathize with all that. But just like with anything, there's a breaking point where it goes from, okay, I'm not sympathetic anymore because of it's gone too far. And what you see in day-to-day behavior from a lot of people, I don't know exactly where the breaking point is. Like, it's very complicated when it comes to human feelings and behavior and stuff. But there are plenty of examples where you say, even if this is the case with you, it doesn't excuse what you're doing right now.
You just have a duty. You have a responsibility to uphold. That's completely normal, and it should be expected. Let me go on to the next two. I'll give you two at a time, I guess. Poor listening skills. This is something that's...
What? Sorry, say it again. I wasn't listening.
I'm sorry. I'll repeat myself here. Poor listening skills. That's the first one. The other one is difficulty accepting criticism. So people who have poor listening skills, there's a lot of traits or aspects to poor listening, whether it's just straight up ignoring what someone else is saying, or selective listening, where you're only listening for key things that they're saying that you can latch on and argue about. People who are more optimistic, or people who are trained in management to de-escalate stressful situations, or first responders, those kind of people, they're trained to pick out the agreeable things in a conversation you're having with somebody else, and use that as your anchor point to kind of move around the more disagreeable aspects. But for someone who thinks the world revolves around them, for someone who's very introspective in the worst possible way, they're not going to see it that way. They're going to see anything that's negative as an attack on them. They're not going to care about the positives or any connection, because they're not seeking connection. Connection with you is beneath them. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of their time. And of course, that goes right hand in hand with accepting criticism. I mean, if someone tells you something about yourself that you think is either untrue or unfavorable, maybe it's true, but you don't like the fact. You know, if you're a fat guy and someone calls you fat, you might not like that fact, and so you dismiss them. You don't care. You don't accept that criticism at all. These are bad traits, I know. You should try to stay away from having these mentalities. And I'm sure if you're listening to this, we've all probably been in a situation where we've done this exact thing. I'm guilty of it too. You know, there are certain people who, if they tell me something, even if it's true, if it's coming from a certain person, I don't want to hear it. Right?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's everybody has their things that they're a little sensitive about, and the key thing you said there is depending on who it's coming from. But not just that, it can be who it's coming from, and or how it's being delivered. Because there's ways to be critical of somebody in a way that's received much differently. The same person can deliver the same message 2 different ways and get 2 different reactions because of the delivery. So I don't like always harping on that, because that, just like everything else, can easily be weaponized. And the person who doesn't take criticism can just fall back on, well, I don't like the way they said it. And that's, you can't measure that. Even if another person was in the room and witnessed the conversation, then it's up to their interpretation of whether or not it was said okay or not. So it's impossible to measure, which is why it's an easy fallback excuse for somebody who just flat out doesn't like the criticism. It's just, I don't like the way they said it. Could be true. Other times it might just be a cop-out. But what you described as the first one, I guess both of them, I see a lot in like political debates, which we had a whole episode about. And I mentioned on multiple episodes, especially the politically charged episodes, how the sides of a conversation or the sides of a debate who are arguing agree on more than they realize. You were talking about that with the de-escalation. If there's like a domestic dispute, the de-escalator, the officer, finds the agreeable points, which is easier than everyone involved probably realized, because there's more of it there than people realize. But the 2 people who are fighting are focused on the disagreeable aspect, hence the fight. But with political debates, you see this all the time, where a person will deliberately not listen clearly and actively to what the other person is saying. And then you can tell this because their response to what the person says is very off. Whereas like the person responds as if he said the sky is green, but I clearly said the sky is blue, but you want to attack me and the only way to do that is to pretend that I said the sky is green. And or they won't hear the whole thing, that, like you said, they'll pick out certain words and then attack you for those words. It's a very bad faith tactic that is meant for the purpose of the fight. Now, a political debate, that's the point. You're kind of having an argument. But if you're talking about personal relationship and the 2 people are having a fight and that happens, then you have to ask yourself, are the 2 people or one of the people involved actively seeking out a fight? I know that happens every now and then. People are, in a mood and they are just looking to take it out on somebody, that kind of thing. I know that kind of thing happens. But if you take a step back and look at it from afar, you realize how silly that is. 2 people who have a relationship with each other, husband, wife, friends, siblings, whatever, and at least one of them, if not both of them, are actively trying to start a fight with the other person by not actively listening. It's silly. Like I said, I'm not completely judging because I've done it too, but it's silly when you think about it.
It's a very emotional response. I want to take a moment to talk a little bit more about the relationship aspect of what you said. The political thing, obviously, I agree 100%. That happens all the time. To tie this back to what the episode is and being self-centered or thinking the world revolves around you, this really flares up when it comes to those close relationships, a husband, a wife, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, people living together, because you're so, you're supposed to have like a deeper connection in those relationships. So it's easier to start fights over things that aren't important or to latch on to things that are disagreeable. There's always going to be something like that. The more you know somebody, the more that's going to be the case. If you just walk across someone in the street that you don't know, you don't have a lot to disagree on because you don't know their opinions, right? But those closer to you, they're more vulnerable. And this, it's a shame that this happens. But again, it goes back to the point I made about a lack of empathy. You don't have empathy. You don't care about the other person, what the other person feels about the situation. You're concerned with how you feel about the situation. And that, it's really hard for me to say what to do from this point if you're in a situation like that, other than get out. If your spouse is like that, if they're a very self-centered person, you're not going to get the kind of care that you might be looking for, okay? So it may be a good situation. It may be a good time to, let's see here, reevaluate and circle back to, as my kids love to say, to that conversation. that's
and a way this could play out would be something like we'll say me and Zach are the other ones having the argument, and I'll be the bad guy in the scenario. I say to you, maybe not these exact words, but it doesn't matter, that you never respect me. You never respect me.
I don't respect your emotional boundaries.
And I don't go any further than that. You may ask for examples, and I'll say, I don't need to give you examples. Why do I need examples? I like in my head, or even what I'll say out loud, just me saying that is enough for you to just accept that as the truth, that you don't respect me, and you have to now make the steps to change. Otherwise, you don't care. That's sort of how the whole thing's going to go. Then, possibly in the same argument, if not a different time, you come back to me and say, Brian, you don't respect me. And our response is, yes, I do. Of course I do. That's ridiculous. And now I'm not even holding the same standard. I'm not asking for, I won't even ask for evidence. I'll just immediately deny it. So again, in both situations, I get to decide. I decide if you're respecting me. I decide if I'm respecting you. I decide both of these things. And why do I decide both these things? Because I say so. Like, and you are, and again, the most wildest part of all this is you, Zach, are supposed to accept those terms. Why you would, I have no idea. But you're supposed to accept the terms that I decide both of these things for both of us. And I just do that. And there's no, like, negotiation when it comes to this for a person who's in this mindset. It's just, that's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want it to be that way. Well, I do. But it's not just because I want it to be that way. It's not necessarily better that way. It just is that way. So, like, it's already baked into everything. So any kind of pushback is just seen as, like, how are you pushing back on that? It is that way. So it's a mental hurdle that is almost impossible to clear.
You know, as you're speaking there, Brian, I'm thinking about if there's any kind of statistic that would show people with a certain personality don't have deeper relationships or can't maintain relationships. Maybe some kind of marriage divorce rate or something amongst narcissistic individuals. Oh, who knows? Something like that. I think that would be an interesting statistic to look at.
I would imagine they're very poor as far as their success rates.
I would imagine too, but I also imagine that the surveys themselves are probably self-reporting, and that's going to skew the numbers in its own way. So probably not that useful to see those reports. But I can tell you, look, you know, for the people that I've known in my life who are like what you're describing, very self-centered, think the world revolves around them, you know, that kind of person, I am just going to give up on. You know, I'm not going to continue to waste my energy trying to play their game, where they make all the rules and I just have to be, you know, a participant in their world. I get it. You want to be the main character, that's fine. You can do that in your own little story. Problem is, I'm not going to be your side character. All right.
But that goes back to the last point I made was it's not up for negotiation for these people. It's not like you get to opt in or out, and it's not you get a choice. It's just that's just how it is. It just is that way. So like, there's no way out of it for you. So any kind of pushback won't even just be seen as an attack. It'll be like, what? How can you opt out of this? You can't opt out of it. That's the way it is. I'm the main character. Again, they don't say it that way, but that's how I see how they see it.
And I think you're right. But what's hilarious about this is that they're living in a fantasy. In reality, the other person's just going to walk away. I'm sure, Brian, you've worked enough jobs. You've probably had that manager who's like this, like what we're talking about. They're not considerate of the employees. They're not considerate of anyone going on, any of the issues going on in the department. It's only about them. And then they can't seem to keep people working for them for some reason. It's the strangest thing, right? They expect them to, but they don't. They keep leaving. Well, there might be a reason for that. And this is obviously, this just covers more of the reasons that would happen. All right, I want to give you a couple more here. I don't really have much left. Manipulation, manipulative people. These people who think the world revolves around them often manipulate others around them through sort of, in a way, kind of what you were just describing, playing mind games with people, playing the word games. You know, obviously I respect you, but you don't respect me. So you're playing on emotional vulnerability with other people. You're doing
it's emotional blackmail.
Blackmail, all that. You're doing all this because you want to build up yourself, and you want to build up the power that you have over other people. You like to feel like you're in control. Yeah, that's.
Yes. So the thing that came to mind when you said that, as I said, like jumping in there was emotional blackmail. Mm-hmm. Now, to be clear, for manipulation, this applies to every one of the bullet points that Zach's already mentioned. If you know someone who is guilty of one of these things, that doesn't mean the conclusion is they think the world revolves around them or they're a narcissist. It's not that concrete. This whole thing is very complex. Obviously, the more boxes you check, the more likely it is. But especially manipulation, because there's people who are manipulative, who aren't necessarily thinking the world revolves around them. They're manipulative for maybe that specific person for a specific reason. Still not good. I'm just saying, manipulation is not by and large, oh, this person is manipulating me, oh, he must be self-centered. Not that simple. But back to emotional blackmail. I mentioned this before in passing. We'll get into it again. And it's funny. I saw like one of those YouTube videos where it's all like a caricature, like a cartoon is playing out in front of you as they're explaining what's going on. I forgot what the channel that was doing it, and the way they explained emotional blackmail with these cartoon characters. Ever since then, it's been like locked in my brain. So like, I'm not going to explain it as well as this video, but I'm going to try. So, a person will kind of like set certain conditions on the other person, but a consequence of the condition not being a favorable one. So it could be something like, if this person doesn't do certain thing, then that proves he doesn't care about me. Mm-hmm. That proves he doesn't love me. Now, sometimes the thing that you're asking to prove that makes sense. If the person, for example, if the thing is, if you cheat on me, that proves you don't love me. That very well could be true. So that one could be a valid sentence to follow. But the emotional blackmail doesn't do something like that. There's something like they will give you a condition, make some kind of rule. They won't tell you the rule, or they'll tell you the rule, but you don't accept the rule. And in either scenario, you just the rule still applies. So it'll be something like Valentine's Day is coming up. If he doesn't get me the necklace that I saw in the jewelry store the other day that I said I really loved, if he doesn't get me that specific necklace, then he doesn't love me. So in the first scenario, she doesn't tell him that this is the condition. So he has no idea that the entire basis of their relationship is based on him getting her this necklace. But the second scenario, she does tell him, and he rejects it in some way. I can't get you a necklace. I can't afford it. We don't have the necklace anymore. It's out of stock. I had a different idea, something in mind. I clearly still love you, so I'm getting you these things, all these. But in either case, the woman says, nope, doesn't matter. You don't get me this necklace, you don't love me. And then you don't get the necklace, you don't love me. But they're not going to frame it that way. They'll come back later on and say, he didn't respect me, he didn't love me, he didn't give me the things that I needed, so therefore I left him. He's the bad guy. Mm-hmm. That's a very specific, kind of silly example, but it doesn't just apply to relationships. Parents do this with their children. Children do this with their parents. Friends do this with each other. Siblings, neighbors do it with neighbors, co-workers definitely do it with each other. So it's that kind of thing, and it happens way more than people realize.
Yeah, the story about the woman expecting something of someone else. We have an episode where we talk about communication pretty in depth. I mean, the entire episode is just about communication. Good communication, of course, is such a key thing. The expectation of expecting someone to do something that you don't tell them it's quite ridiculous. I think when people do this, and people do this all the time, it's really, really ridiculous because you're setting yourself up to be disappointed. Okay. And when you're disappointed, you're going to act out. You're going to be irrational with the other person. You're going to treat them worse because you're now disappointed. And the other person didn't have a fair shot at knowing. I'll give you an example. I'm a married man, happily married of however many years it's been. I don't keep track, but very happily married.
Good start. Not
Yes. My wife may do something where she wants something. She wants something from me, but she doesn't want to tell me. Okay, this is, I guess, people can call me sexist if they want. This is a very prominent thing when it comes to women, is wanting things and not telling their husband or boyfriend or whatever that she wants it, and then being disappointed when she doesn't get it. Okay, this all comes back to communication, both for men and women, of course. Being able to say what it is that you want and making sure the other person is okay with it and okay with doing it, it's an important thing. Yes, there is a degree of, well, if you want to show someone you care about them, how much do you pay attention to them? If I were to get Brian a random gift, for example, I don't have to ask him what he wants. I know what he wants. He wants more episodes of the Value Added Podcast, and so I'm going to continue to put these episodes out there. But that's just knowing somebody, right? But there's a certain expectation. Perhaps Brian is really into, let's say, collecting old-fashioned trinkets of some sort, and I wasn't aware of this, and he was expecting me to give him one of these old-fashioned trinkets.
Real quick, because I've heard this before, and I don't.
You have
what
heard
is a
this.
trinket?
Oh,
Like I've heard the word trinket, but what is a
a
trinket?
trinket is like some kind of collectible.
So it's a group of things. It's not one specific thing.
No, it's not a group of things. It could be like a chalice, for example. It could be a little statue or one of those little cat paw statues.
So you can have a box of trinkets in a box, obviously, but
sure.
Each item in the box is a different item.
Yes, they're all a bunch of different items, but a various spread. But anyway,
the more you know.
Back to the point. If you were really big into collecting antique trinkets, okay, of any kind, or antique haunted dolls or something, some crazy thing, which no judgment, of course.
That was a turn I wasn't expecting. Okay.
But how am I supposed to know that? How am I? And if you have an expectation that I'm going to give you a brand new haunted doll from 1970, not brand new, obviously used, but how am I supposed to know that? And that creates creates a toxic situation where the person's automatically going to be disappointed, and you're going to be disappointed at the end of the day because you didn't get what you want. Trinkets, man. I still
talking about a trinket thing and the haunted dolls. I have a response, obviously, to that, because there's a second piece of the emotional blackmail that you didn't touch on, obviously, because one at a time, which I think is probably more common, but it's just as bad. But before we do that, we're gonna take a short break. Everyone could take a breather, stretch for a little bit, but don't go anywhere because we have content. I'll let you decide whether it's good or bad. Here we go.
Content.
Welcome, everyone. This is the first time I'm doing this particular segment on video. It's too early for us to do anything where like it has a different background or anything like that. But I just wanted to make that official. So it's a celebratory moment here at the Value Added Podcast. So anyone who has followed knows what I've already done, which means you know what's coming next. So today we're doing This Is Why I Hate People. And once again, just like the last 3 of these that I've done, we're going to one of the 2 big theme parks in Florida. And this one's back to Universal. I cannot believe it's taken me this long to do it. This is my number 1 example that I use when I talk to like my friends or family about hating people. This is my number 1 example. And I'm only bringing it up now. Okay, so I was having one of my famous staycations at a Universal resort. When you live in Florida, it sounds kind of silly to stay in Florida to go to one of the Universal resorts. But if you live here and you want to stay at one of those resorts because they're freaking awesome, you have to just go anyway. Like, I'm not going to move to Arizona just to fly back to our Universal, so it makes more sense. Mm-hmm. But anyway, not the point. So I'm at one of these resorts. It's like the second day, like my second full day there. It doesn't matter. And I'm at the pool, and it's a little before 11. It's like 10:45. I'm set up. I purposely set up in an area where I think most people are not going to be sitting. So I have space to myself. No one snoring next to me or anything stupid shit like that. Behind me is a pool bar that has a grill and tables. So you don't have to necessarily eat it at the pool. If you don't want to, you can eat it at the tables. And they're not open yet. It says 11 o'clock. The sign's clearly posted. But the slide-in door partition is half up or half down, depending how you look at it. And this is done purposely because there's workers on one side of the door, workers on the other side of the door, and they're passing stuff to each other back and forth so they can set up. Person on one side of the door is inside where the kitchen is, and the other side is out in the guest area, and they're taking stuff from the workers, like napkins and stuff, and they're setting everything up. A lady, an old lady, who's in her bathing suit or whatever, she's ready to go, she walks up to the door, she sticks her head underneath and looks up. Hello? Hello? The worker who's outside in the guest area, in her typical customer service way, hello, ma'am, how can I help you today? Yeah, I wanted, she started writing off her drink order. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. We'll open at 11 o'clock, so come back then, we'll take care of you. She said it way nicer than I just did. She did it in her typical customer service way. The lady stood there for a little bit, like looked around, and kind of stomped off. And at this point, she's approaching me. She doesn't realize, like, the point is that she's not saying anything to me, but she's approaching so I can hear her. She says, God forbid you open 3 minutes early. Okay. Here's the problem with your argument, lady. If 3 minutes is not that big of a deal, why can't you wait 3 minutes? That's the thing people don't understand. The episode actually fits perfectly into the episode today. There's a perfect segment for it. Perfect topic for it. So, and this, this is a specific example, but I see this all the time with people, and they do not see the logical flaw in that complaint. God forbid you open 3 minutes early. Is it that big of a deal? You're right, it's not. So why are you complaining about it? You can't wait. If you think 3 minutes is not that long to wait, then wait 3 minutes. I don't understand that. And here's a side thing that she didn't even think about, probably. It's 11 o'clock in the morning, and you want a drink, and you can't wait 3 minutes for it. This sounds like a you problem. My good buddy Zach always says, there's two types of problems in this world. The me problem and a you problem. That's a you problem. I know you're on vacation. I know you're trying to relax. But A, that's less of a reason to complain because you're going to be at the damn pool all day. You'll be fine for 3 minutes. And let's take a step back and realize that you might have a problem if you can't wait 3 minutes for an alcoholic beverage. And why are you yelling at the workers? They're just doing what their job is. They did not make the rules. They probably didn't have the beer ready yet because it wasn't 11 o'clock yet, and you're pissed. This is why I hate people. I hope she drowned in the pool. Bye.
Wow, Brian, that was hard not to make some comments on throughout your story there. I've definitely met people like this, and I think the point you bring up the most, which is the thing I think you should hold on to. Okay, I can't speak. The thing you should hold on to the most in this sort of situation is the waiting 3 minutes. It is not the company's responsibility to change its policies, rules, whatever, in order to accommodate a single person. Okay, you can wait, and here's the other thing. It's the part that's hidden behind what she said. Is it really that big of a deal to open up 3 minutes early? What she's saying is you're going to inconvenience me by me having to wait 3 minutes, and this perfectly ties into today's episode because she's thinking about herself. She's not thinking about the other people because she would be inconveniencing everyone else there by them having to start operating 3 minutes before they're supposed to. It's a small amount of time. It's not that big of a deal. And they have a job to do. They have to get your stuff ready. They have to get coolers, cups, whatever. I don't work where this is, but there are processes they have to do. Hell, for some places, their computer system might not even be operational until 11 o'clock. And so they couldn't even ring you up or take a payment from you until their systems are online. Are you considering any of this when you're complaining?
And I didn't even mention this part. She stuck her head underneath the half-down partition door. Mm-hmm. Isn't the fact that it's half down a clue that they're not open yet? Isn't that alone a clue?
Clearly. But also, now that you mentioned, since you reminded me about the thing being open, it could have been some Final Destination. I won't continue that thought, but...
It drops.
Yes. You did it for it right
Or
now.
how the big, I forgot the name, the monster in Jabba's palace in Star Wars, how Luke got away from him by throwing the rock against the door and then the door collapsed on him in Return of the Jedi. That kind of thing. That would have been... I would have given. I always give good reviews on surveys when I get from the resorts and stuff, hotels I stay at. I always get good reviews, even if it wasn't a good experience, because if it wasn't a good experience, it was not their fault. Usually, 99.999% of the time. So I always give good reviews. But if that happened, I would have been like, "This is the greatest single resort in the history of mankind. Thank you for doing that." Unfortunately, it didn't happen.
The people reviewing your review just look at the date and the time and say, "Huh, that's interesting." A woman died there at the same time. That's crazy.
That's probably not related. No,
not related.
Okay. So,
also, getting an alcoholic beverage at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
I mean, it's
even if you're on vacation. I know. And I mean,
at least at least have some day before you can start drinking. Right.
The biggest example of this, where you're drinking all day and it's like, why is it so early? It's on a cruise ship. But I can understand that a little bit because if you get a drink package, you need to get 12 drinks a day to make the drink package worth it financially. And unless you're a heavyweight, you can't truck 12 drinks in 2 or 3 hours. So you got to space it out. So I get that a little bit more, but again, it's 3 minutes. It's 3 minutes. And I know it's 3 minutes because you said 3 minutes as you walked away. So
just absolutely ridiculous. Well,
yeah.
Good segment for today. I mean, it really does fit into the episode quite well.
It fit very well, yes. So, as you pointed out, the aspect of people who don't say this out loud, you said specifically, it's mostly women who do this. That's probably true, but it's not relevant. Regardless of who's doing it, the fact is it does happen. It's hard to pinpoint how many people do it because it's not happening in anybody's head. It's not happening out loud. It's happening in somebody's head. So the more important one to talk about is the one that is not being done in your head, because that one you can see a little bit clearer. And that is the ones who tell you out loud, they attach a condition that they want you to uphold, and the consequence of not following this condition is pretty bad. And like you said, and and that there's multiple ways that you can react to this. If I'm the one telling you this condition, you can not understand the condition, but for the good faith, let's just say, make it easier. We'll say it's clear what you mean. You cannot agree to the condition. And there's multiple reasons why you won't agree. It might be impossible. You want me to, if I don't earn $1 million in it by the end of a week, I'm divorcing you because that's, whatever reasons. That's based on what I'm currently doing. That's impossible. I can't make $1 million in a week unless I rob a bank. Well, then I guess we're getting divorced. Like, are you doing it at that point because you want that result? You just want to justify it? So you come up with some crazy scenario that they can't live up to, but then so you can spin it as they didn't give me what I wanted and something else like that. But they also may not agree to it because they think it's ridiculous. Like, it's possible what you want me to do, but it's silly to attach condition of me loving you based on this. That's ridiculous. But then this goes back to what I said before about if you're the center of the universe, the other person doesn't get to decide this. I decide this. I'm the center of the universe. So I get to decide if it's ridiculous or not. You saying it's ridiculous means nothing because I decide that it's not ridiculous, therefore I win. So there's a lot of different ways that this can go. So yeah,
I hope they enjoy being alone for the rest of their life, because that's obviously just not going to happen. And I think,
I'm painting a really blunt picture of how it can go. It might not be this obvious, but it can be something like this.
No, but it's a good point to bring up. I think of course I'm married, even in my situation, there are things that are expressed to me from my wife or desires that she has, things she wants to do that I can't quite fulfill. And for one reason or another, I think going back to communication, because again, I think that's one of the most important things, making sure the other person understands why something can't be done is equally as important. I'd say I've felt bad before for many reasons. I'll feel bad if there's something that is within my power to do that I know I should have done, I know I could have done, I even had the desire to do it, but I didn't for some reason. I'll give you a perfect example. Today is the day that we're recording this episode is on a Wednesday. Trash is supposed to get picked up in the morning on Wednesdays. Well, due to some circumstances last night, I was not able to get the trash cans out. So trash didn't get picked up. Gonna have to go for next week. But
I'll make sure I'm out there next week.
These type of things happen. And ultimately, it's not, if we're talking about relationships, you fail to give someone the thing that they asked for. You fail to do what is expected of you. The consequences have to be proportional, okay? Not getting the trash out, the consequences are my trash can's full for a week, or has to be overflowing, whatever. The consequences for not giving your spouse $1 million should not be divorce, because that's stupid. That's incredibly stupid.
That's why I said, yeah, I gave an extreme example.
Yeah.
It's not going to be that ridiculous all the time, but it can be something like that.
It can be something like that. For example, your spouse wants to go out to dinner tonight. They don't want to be home. They want to go out to this particular restaurant, but you don't want to. I mean, if you agree to it and you don't do it, that's a problem, because you shouldn't agree to things that you're not going to do. I tell my son this all the time. I tell both my kids this all the time. If you don't want to do something, don't agree to it. But if you're going to agree, if you're not going to agree to it, then them being upset with you, it loses its power. And if you don't have, this whole world revolves around me mentality, you can clearly see that if you want to do something and the other person says no, well, that's the answer. The answer is no.
Well, that's the key, Zach. You said if a person doesn't have the mentality. But if you're talking to a person who does have that mentality, they're not going to see it that way. They're not going to see it as this other person has the right to not agree to what I asked. They look at it as it's baked in. Because I want it, it is automatically going to be given to me, and this other person is not only wants to do it, but is just going to do it. Like, I don't know how else I can explain it other than that, but it's such a...
I get it.
It's such a sinister, it's such a sinister way of looking at the world that the other person's... It's not even like you're considering the other person's feelings secondary. You're not considering them at all, almost like they don't have any kind of feelings or perspective or desires at all, because everything is about you. Everything about you, including what's going on with them. Mm-hmm. Everything is about you. So and this ties into the easily offended thing too, because one of the things easily offended people do is they purposely look for reasons to get offended so they can have the reaction. This type of thing that we're talking about, a lot of times what's happening is, among many things, is a person's purposely looking for a reason to be disappointed or let down by the other person, so they can be mad at that person.
Yeah, it gives them a power. It gives them a power over the other person. What I want to do here is, we're getting close to the end of the episode, so I want to take a little bit of time to talk about where do we think this comes from. There's obviously the nature nurture debate. Where are we becoming who we are because of what we're exposed to? Are we who we are because of how we were born? I think for me, I can talk about my own experience because that's the only person I am. I did not have a lot of. I don't think I had a lot of empathy when I was younger. When I was much younger, teenage years, whatever. At that point in my life. You should, though. You should. And I think a lot of it has to do with how much time do you spend thinking about the world around you, the consequences of your actions, the feelings of others, and also, in the house, right? Unfortunately, in today's day and age, we have a lot of, single motherhood, right? So we have dads who've decided that they are the most important thing, and so they're going to walk out on the family. You have moms who are staying and taking care of those kids, but some of these sort of bad mentalities kind of shape their way in childhood. Another big thing that I have complained about many times on this podcast, Brian, you're familiar with it, it's called the participation awards, right?
Your favorite
everybody gets a prize. Everyone did a great job. There's no winners here. We're all winners here. That kind of thing. What does that teach? It teaches that you don't have a responsibility to do something exceptional to be treated exceptionally. All right, and if you're not treated exceptionally, that becomes a reason why you're justified in being angry, shouting and yelling and screaming at other people.
Like you see, an example would be like a mother storms into the coach's office, be like, "How dare you not put my son on the team? How dare you?" And it's like, well. He had the lowest 40. He was the slowest one here. He didn't make a single shot in drills. He was terrible on defense. He's out of shape, and he started a fight with one of the people during scrimmage. Yeah, everyone else on the practice was better. I don't care. That's ridiculous. Like the mother's not going to see it that way. So, and the reason I'm bringing up mother is because what you're talking about, Zach, how people go from as a teenager to not feeling empathy. And when I say nobody as a teenager feels empathy, I'm not speaking literally. There are some, but it's probably a very small percentage. One of the things that you probably help determine whether or not that teenager is going to have a little bit of empathy or not is how they're raised. Mm-hmm. Because I've seen teenagers who are mature beyond their years and they have empathy and all that, and then you get a backstory into how they're raised, and you're like, okay, that makes sense. Because one of the things that I've seen, I don't know if I've talked about this theory a lot on the podcast, but now's a good time, I guess, more than anything. The same thing applies to fathers, but I don't want to repeat it with fathers, so we'll just use mothers as an example. Mm-hmm. There's a difference, a big difference between someone who is a good mother and a good parent. I'll say that again. And now I'll say fathers too, so I don't get yelled at by the feminists. There's a difference between being a good father and being a good parent. You can be both, you can be neither. But more importantly, you can be one and not the other. So in this example, it's possible that you are a good mother or a good father to the child. But if you're not a good parent, you're going to see it in a child who grows up without any empathy, without any self-awareness, without any care in the world for how their actions affect others, without anything like that. You have to nip it in the bud when they are younger, but as they start to develop, because when they're 4, like you're not going to be able to sit them down and talk about this kind of thing when they're 4. But like as they get older, you have to try and nip it in the bud. It's your responsibility as the parent to do that, and that's one of the responsibilities of parents that doesn't get talked about. What gets talked about is can you provide for them? Can you put food on the table? Can you go to their soccer games? All those things are important. I agree, but it's the literal raising of them that separates from being a father or mother to a parent. If you're a good mother, that means you cook for them every night. You take their clothes out in the morning. You drive them to the soccer games. You go to the parent-teacher conferences, and you know where they are at all times. You're responsible in that way. But if you don't raise them to be actual adults, none of that matters. So that's a key distinction that I think people don't talk about.
That's an interesting way to put it. I've never heard it described in that way. It's I've heard the concept described. I don't remember exactly how I've heard it described in the past. But yes, there's definitely a difference between doing what is the bare minimum that's required of you.
Keeping them alive.
And keeping them alive and feeding them or providing for them versus going beyond and nurturing them. I've always told my wife this, that we don't raise children, we raise adults, right? The goal is to get them to adulthood. The goal is to help them become functioning good members of society who are able to operate and function in society well and live a happy
kids
life.
Who care about the starving children in China get in the video game system. You want kids to eventually
not necessarily. Here in the United States, okay, we have to take care of number one first. But
oh no, I didn't say give up the system, but at least care that there are starving children in China.
Yes, it's the care, it's the empathy. All of that is obviously very important. It's hard to look into a situation and say whether a parent is good or not, whether, a child's behavior is the fault of a parent. Again, that goes back to the nature-nurture debate. The parent could be trying their best and doing everything quote-unquote right, but the child turns out to not have empathy. Obviously, there's mental disorders that can contribute to this, but those aside, everyone, including children, still has the capacity and the ability to be able to choose how they decide that they're going to behave. My kids don't like when I say this to them, because I say that you have to have personal responsibility. You can't just blame everyone else for everything that happens to you. You have to take responsibility. But this is something I hope it sticks with them when they grow up and when they get older. How you decide to treat other people, that's up to you. No one can make you treat other people any kind of one way or the other. I can teach you everything. I can show you exactly how I would do it. That doesn't mean you're going to follow in my footsteps exactly. So the parents aspect is obviously a big contributing factor. I think there's a lot of failing households, a lot of failing family units out there that have led to a lot of very narcissistic people who think the world revolves around them because, and maybe it's a retaliation of some sort towards the systems that they believe landed them where they are. For a girl growing up in a household with a single mother, she might have a skewed perspective as to what a man is or what a man should be, right? And so if she's not getting what she has determined for herself to be the right things out of the relationship, she feels like she's getting gypped. Now, that might not be true, but it's hard for her to have the perspective to understand that because she was missing something so crucial. If anything, I could say this is a PSA for making sure that you keep your family together.
Well, I know people never want to hear when it gets into political because it's a right-left separation that boggles my mind, just like a lot of them boggle my mind. When the right specifically focuses on the importance of keeping families together, keeping nuclear families together, fathers in the home. Whenever they gets brought up, the other side loses their mind, especially when it gets brought up in the conversation of race and all that. What about the fathers in the home, and everyone freaks out.
You don't need two parents? Okay.
First of all, if you're reacting to something like that as a yell and scream, that's not a good start to having a good argument. It's not at all. Doesn't mean you don't have one. It's just not a good start. But put aside your emotional reaction to the race war that you think is going on and realize the validity of what the person's saying. Just because you hate Charlie Kirk, for example, God rest your soul, just because you hate Charlie Kirk, for example, doesn't mean that he can't say something that makes sense. I've used this argument with people who hate Trump all the time. You can agree with something that Trump says, and doesn't mean all of a sudden you like Trump. Like, you can disagree with something that he says. Same thing if someone on the right, and you hate everyone on the right, but they can say something, you'd be like, I still don't like you because of whatever reason, but I agree with this specific thing. But because of the political divide we have in this country, you can't agree with the other side. My point is, when they talk about fathers not being in the home, why is there disagreement to that? If you want to disagree on the numbers, fine. But how can you disagree that fathers not being in the home is a bad thing for the child? Unless the father is a pedophile or a rapist or a murderer, how can you think that the father not being there is better for the child than the father being there? How can you argue that?
There are several things that immediately come to mind when you say that, Brian. One is obviously the equality stuff. The other one is the feminist movement. The problem here is that if you were to admit that fathers are necessary and needed in the household, a couple things are going to happen. One, you're devaluing the single mother households out there because now you're saying that they're missing something, which is obviously true. If you acknowledge that point, now it seems like they're not doing enough of a good job. Or the single mothers out there might feel less than adequate now. I know it's a psychological game, but here's the other thing. Here's the other issue. It also becomes a racial issue. Because if we look at families, broken families across racial lines, we see a massive discrepancy. Now, again, this comes down to personal choice. Unfortunately, there's certain races that value independence, autonomy, over responsibility. So those particular people who do that, well, the numbers are skewed. Now, if you say, hey, that's a bad thing, now you're saying that a cultural group is performing poorly, and you can't have that either. So
well, you can, depending on which cultural group you're talking about. But yeah.
Exactly. But because of which one it is in reality, they can't do that. They can't afford to do that. They're going to lose their constituents. That's why I don't understand a lot of people who buy into this type of stuff. I've met plenty of people who buy into these ideologies that are being spread. I don't get it, because it's the moment you start peeling back the layers and seeing, well, why do you have this outrageous, preposterous position? Oh, it's because you're trying to protect this group. That's the reason you have this position. Okay, even though clearly reality says that the position you're on is wrong.
Well, I mean, yeah. Like, I was reacting as if, like, you were saying these things, and these are your points. And obviously, I know that's not the case. But it's such a silly argument to me, especially the first part. Because if the whole devaluing a single mother household, because two things can be true at once. You can say a single mother is somebody who, especially someone who's doing it correctly, is someone who should be revered and admired and, and given a ton of credit for doing that. If they're doing it the right way, that's obviously true. But it's also true that they're missing something. Hence the word single mother. Both those things can be true simultaneously, and acknowledging that the missing doesn't negate the other part. But this goes back to service level versus non-service level. A service level reaction is what you were just saying. That's a service level reaction that you have to, it's a binary, you have to have one or the other. If you favor one, you're advocating for one, you're automatically dismissing the other. Life doesn't work that way. But it's ridiculous to me that that first argument would even be broached, because you're not, I mean, I guess in the literal sense, you're devaluing a single mother household in the literal sense of, like, two is better than one. But it doesn't mean that, like, you're saying to a single mother, you suck for being a single mother, because like, you're doing a good job of what you have. But why do that if you can have a second person helping you, and you're only one person. Everybody needs help. So, like, it's just a weird way to look at it. The racial thing, I mean, I don't know how else to respond to that. You're obviously correct, and that's why they get very testy during racial conversations. But again, agree more than you disagree, because if you strip away the racial component of it and just say, forget about race for a second, is it better in most cases for a child to have two parents in the household or one? If they're being good faith, I can't see how they would say one. So that they would acknowledge two, which means that it's almost universally agreed upon that two is better than one. So if that's the case, you have to acknowledge fatherless homes, and you can even fatherless homes or even motherless homes are bad for the child. But like you said, but then race gets involved, and it becomes a wall you can't get past. Since
you're talking about this, I'm going to bring up another point real quick, and that has to do with basically government regulation over how children are raised and how the incentives that go into things like daycare, stuff like that. There's an incentive that exists outside of just protecting single motherhood or protecting racial solidarity. There's an incentive financially for perpetuating the idea that there's nothing wrong with having broken families or broken homes, and I think that's a lot of the that's part of the reason why there was a push to eliminate the nuclear family, or to look down on the nuclear family as if it was a bad thing. The nuclear family breeds conservatism. It breeds, care for your country, care for your people. It breeds empathy, understanding, in a level that is not there for people who unfortunately don't have that solid home. And there's also a sense of jealousy, I think, for some of the proponents of this idea, because you didn't get something growing up, you didn't get something in your life, so your idea is, well, I had to struggle, so you should have to struggle as well, so we can all struggle together. Again, it's a really self-centered viewpoint, and it's quite frankly disgusting. I could bring up certain examples, but I'll say this for myself. If I have to struggle in order for my kids not to struggle, I would choose that 10 times out of 10. Not 9 times out of 10, not 7 times out of 10. 10 times out of 10, I would choose to suffer if it meant my children didn't have to suffer. I don't know about the children in China, like we talked about earlier. Maybe they 1 out of 10, who knows? But for my own children, I want to make sure that they have the best possible life. And unfortunately, in certain communities and certain mindsets, not just in certain communities, but also in certain mindsets, like political parties, this idea that you're more important than your responsibilities is asinine. We had our abortion episodes recently. You guys have probably seen those. It goes right into there. What is more important? Is more important for you to focus on what you want, what you need, or is it more important to focus on what your responsibility is? That's where the divide comes from.
It's funny. To the people who Zach described who are reacting this way about nuclear families out of a case of jealousy, and because I didn't have that, I struggled, watched everybody else not struggle. You are admitting that nuclear families are better. Just saying. Mm-hmm. But to the daycare point, because you hear this pushed a lot on the left, more so than anything else about the daycare, and they incorporate that into I think I saw this on that wonderful, super unbiased, super objective show called The View. And I'm aware of this because my roommates always watch it, and then claim that they're down the middle. But anyway, and they were talking about how the cost of having a child is so astronomical nowadays. What's the point of having a child?
Oh my God, I think I saw that. Did they say it was 200,000 a year?
Yeah, 200,000. Yeah. So I think the number is like 30,000, but they say it was 200,000 every year. So 200,000 a year, that's crazy. But
okay,
anyway,
yeah. I was like, what the hell are you talking about?
If I didn't know what side that show was on politically before that, it'd be obvious then because that is a left-leaning talking point about not having kids. But at the very least, if you're going to do that, get the numbers right. But anyway, they threw daycare into the mix. They said, you know how expensive it is for having daycare? The problem with that argument is the other side advocates for no daycare because one of the parents, usually the mother, stays home. In which case, there's no daycare. And then the father's making enough for both of them, and the mother's staying home. The problem back the other way is the left use that as sexism. Mm-hmm. So, and this is what I see a lot, both sides, but I like picking on the left, so I'm going to pick on the left again. I see this a lot with the left, where they focus on something, and then advocate for something, and they can kind of complain about it in a different context. So they'll advocate for women working, men who want the women to stay home are just patriarchs who are sexist pigs who want to keep women in the kitchen. And then when women work, there's complaints that they can't afford, that everything's too high and daycare's too expensive and stuff like that. Well, if you supported the thing that was advocated for originally, you don't have to worry about that. So it's I remember when I heard the figure. I was in the kitchen trying not to listen, but it was hard not to. I almost dropped the knife I had in my hand, and I was like, I don't know what the number is, but it's not 200,000 per year. Unless you have quintuplets and you send them all to college at the same time, when they're 18, 200,000. What are you buying them? Gold bananas? I don't know.
It is. There's such a massive disconnect between the uber wealthy elites of the world. And these people on The View, they're all worth, $1 billion, millions and millions of dollars, whatever. Right. Yeah, they don't have a single clue. They have no clue. Yeah,
they probably cost $200,000 to raise their kids because they give them all this extra crap, yeah.
No, they're probably, give them all this extra crap, but also because they're not there. They don't want to deal with the kids, so they're hiring someone else. They're hiring a bunch of nannies, or they're hiring a nanny to come over and paying them $100,000 a year to come watch their kids. I won't play into the ridiculous arguments that they use. But I will say one point, and this is important. They're creating problems and then trying to give solutions to the problems that they created. Okay, the things you just said are fantastic regarding what our country should be, what it should look like. One parent should be out working. That parent should be able to make, assuming they have a career, not McDonald's. I'm not advocating for minimum wage crap, but assuming that parent has made good decisions in their life, and that parent should be able to afford to house their family, to house their entire family, take care of the family. And I'm not talking about a family of one kid, 4 or 5, 6 kids. That person should be able to take care of all those kids. And look, in my case, I don't make anywhere near that kind of money. Not even close.
Are you striving for 6 kids though, Zach?
Yeah, we're striving for 6. Maybe 4. I'm kidding. Yeah, probably 4. We'll see. I have not made up my mind yet regarding how many that we're going to have. So not her. It's all about me.
Of course.
Anyway, what was I saying?
How the world should be.
Yeah, so that's obviously an idealistic thing. If a man goes out and works and the woman's able to stay home, take care of the kids, homeschool the kids, take care of the house, that's a great situation, a great scenario. Those kids get what they need growing up. That creates conservatism. You learn how to manage and take care. But since the feminist movement, I think it was World War II, whatever, I'm going to give you my understanding of history. all these men were leaving, women had to kind of step up and do more for their household because they didn't have a choice. Their husbands are gone at war or they're dead or whatever. And so they have to get into the workforce. And then, you know, if they're not treated fairly in the workforce, it just becomes a snowball. Now we need to get treated fairly. Now we need these extra things, these things, whatever. To the point where we've become a society that is designed around the idea of two income households. We're not designed around a single income household anymore. So a lot of these things become more difficult. Yes, it's not designed for one person to work anymore. That's unfortunate. You know, in our case, that's something we're having to consider with and contend with. You know, in our grandparents' generation, that wasn't the case. You know, unfortunately our society's just gone off the rails. Speaking of going off the rails,
this conversation.
Today's topic.
Well, I mean, we covered what we're going to cover about people that think the world revolves around them. I guess the last thing I'll say, just to finish it up, is like, I don't care if you prefer the one parent working and the other one staying home, or the 2-parent household. I think people, again, live in a binary. If you pick one, that means you're against the other. I'm not. Each their own. I don't care. But if you pick the latter, don't complain about the consequences of the latter. Mm-hmm. That's my thing, and that's what you see sometimes. Like, so don't talk about daycare being an added expense and how hard it is to raise a kid with daycare, when daycare can be eliminated if you didn't have the second option. So that's a small example of a kind of complaint. But that's my thing about it is, if both parents want to work, and you think that's fine, and you have kids, and you want to pass off the responsibilities to grandparents, aunts and uncles, or nannies, fine, no problem. But there's consequences to that, pros and cons to everything. Don't complain about those cons. That's my main point.
Okay, fair enough. Well, listen, guys, I'm going to end it like this. The world does not revolve around you. The world revolves around the Value Added Podcast, and that's why you should be part of that world revolving around it.
That one I saw coming.
Yes, you got to revolve around it, and then what's great about it is it revolves around once every week on Fridays at 8 a.m. I think. I always get the time messed up, Brian. Is it 8 or 9 o'clock that we upload?
You tell me, sir.
I think it's 9. I think.
Is that your final answer, sir?
It's my final answer, but you're the one who uploads, so I don't know. It's not my job.
You are incorrect. It's 8 a.m.
It's 8 a.m. Ah, come on. Look, second guess, right? Anyway, guys, so every Friday, 8 a.m., we have new episodes coming out. We cover a lot of different topics. Stuff like this, stuff very different than this. A lot of cool stuff that you guys can look at. You can check out the library here on Spotify or on YouTube. We are on both platforms right now. You can also reach out to us at valueadded.cb@gmail.com if you want to leave a comment about, you know, how'd you like the episode, or things that you want to see us do. You can do so there. Of course, you can use the comment sections on YouTube or Spotify as well and interact with the poll. That's going to be it for us. We appreciate you being here, appreciate your time. We hope to see you in our next one. Bye.